Hello everyone, this is Big Entertainment and we're back again, and here now we have another video for you, and we're going to talk about Rocky 4 and the director's cut of the movie, and whether the movie is fine as it is and whether it actually requires a director's cut. Now, I'm pretty much sure that you all know what Rocky 4 is, but just in case there's anybody watching who incredibly doesn't know what Rocky 4 is, the film is the fourth installment of the iconic Rocky franchise, seeing Rocky face his ultimate challenge against Russian boxer Ivan Drago. Now, Rocky 4 was a massive box office success back in 1985, grossing over $300 million and cemented Sylvester Stallone as one of the biggest movie and most cultural superstars of the entire decade. And it's no understatement to say that Rocky 4 captured and defined a whole generation of movie and sports fans, and it was integral for a lot of youngsters growing up watching films, and it certainly was integral for me when I was growing up during the 80s. It was so full of that transcendent, inspirational superheroism and personality traits that I think is sadly missing amongst so many of modern day movies. But moving forward, and now we're getting the director's cut of the movie, and the title will be called Rocky 4, Rocky vs. Drago, the ultimate director's cut. I'm not really a fan of that title, to be honest, but I guess they've got to rebrand it to make it seem as if it's new and fresh. Now, the extended edition is due for release on November the 12th, 2021, and will actually be released theatrically on November the 11th for one day. I'm not sure why it's for one day. I think they could have ramped up the hype for this movie a bit more. Now, the most notable aspect of this extended edition is that the director's cut will have 40 additional minutes, which is something that I always value whenever we get a director's cut. When you get a substantial amount of extra footage, that really makes you feel as if it's something substantial as opposed to the odd one or two re-edited scenes. And this will essentially make the movie a whole different film overall. Now, the original theatrical cut was around 85 minutes, so this new edition with its extra footage will end up running in around 125 minutes. So I believe that will make it the longest of the original 5 films that we saw throughout the 70s all the way through to 1990. So in terms of the overall question, does Rocky 4 actually need an extended edition or a director's cut? Now, to be honest, I've probably got mixed feelings, because when we look at Rocky 4, if you're coming at it from a critical consensus, is it the perfect movie? No. But if you're coming at it more from a populist, entertainment, rewatchable perspective, then is it the perfect movie? And then I would have to say yes. It's one of those films that's just right in terms of that rewatchability. I've watched this film countless amount of times, regardless of how well I know the ending and all of the songs and the montages. I can still come back to this movie and watch it again and again and again. It's one of those films that just hits the right notes in terms of giving you that basic story, having lots of dramatic moments, emotional moments. There's no bloat, there's no fluff, there's no meandering. It's very direct, straight to the point, and without question gives you more than an epic and satisfying climax. So still in my elderly years today, even when I go and rewatch Rocky 4, it's one of those films that I really think doesn't really need much more in terms of editing or modifying. I think it really works. Now, if I'm taking much more of a hyper-critical consensus, the only aspect of the film that I think could warrant some additional elements is probably the first part of the story, where we could have had much more context with Apollo and his motivation to fight Drago. We look at the story overall, and he's very happy in life. He's had an established career. He's been training Rocky for a number of years. And we see in the original version, of course, he's got a very nice mansion, very similar to Rocky. I think there could have been more established motivations or reasons as to why Apollo wants to suddenly jump back in the ring against Drago. And I think also we could have had more elements in terms of Rocky's decision to fight Drago. We did get that to an extent when we have certain scenes with him and Adrian, when she's trying to spell out the reasons not to fight. And that's a very good scene as well, that staircase scene that we remember when she's standing up the top telling him that he can't win. And we could have had a couple more scenes with Adrian as well. But really, apart from that, I think that's the only element of Rocky 4 that really needed any more additional weight to it, or supportive material. Now, there was a recent trailer for this extended edition, and when we look at certain scenes, it certainly seems that we will be getting far more of that added element with Apollo, as what I mentioned before, in terms of his overall motivations as to why he wants to fight Drago. So that's a good sign. Now, there was a big scene where we see the boxing commission talking to Rocky, outlining the dangers of Drago, the fact that he's fought one person and that he's died in the ring. And this was one scene that was actually in consideration and got cut from the original version of the film. And this is one scene that I think should have absolutely been in the film, because that's what gives part of that overall conflict within Rocky, whether to go ahead and fight Drago, and actually would have added more realism in many ways. The fact that you have a boxing commission is telling the fighter not to fight because of the dangers, and as we all know within the original story, the boxing commission never sanctioned the fight. So basically, Rocky went to fight Drago without having a belt. So you could have added very much more of a commentary in terms of the boxing hierarchy and the higher powers within the sport having a real concern over the current issues within the sport. And that's something that's a very interesting element that you could have brought into the story, and again would have added more weight in terms of Rocky's overall decision. So that's one scene that should definitely have been in the original version, and I'm glad that they are adding that in this extended cut. It also looks like we'll get more reflective scenes in terms of Rocky and his son. We see those earlier parts where he's talking to his son about making the choices you make and giving him life and lessons. And again, that's all good. That's giving more weight to the character. And there are certain hints and tones that Adrian will have more involvement. There are a couple of lines here when she's talking more about Rocky not going to fight Drago. We also saw through the trailer where we will get some re-edited footage of elements of Apollo's fight with Drago. It also seems incredibly that we'll get more extended dialogue with Ivan Drago in certain scenes at the press conference and also at the ring post fight with Apollo. And to be honest, when hearing it, it kind of sounded a bit off. I'm not surprised that they took away a lot of these lines of dialogue in the theatrical cut. And to be honest with you, what makes Ivan Drago such a menacing and iconic antagonist is the fact that he has limited dialogue. That's what adds so much to his mystery and his overall impact. So I'm not too sure or certain about giving him more dialogues throughout the film. Now, when it comes to a director's cut of Rocky IV, the biggest concern for me is that the montages and fight sequences will be changed. Now, for me, these are the most classic and iconic parts of the film, and they should be left completely alone. These scenes are truly exceptional in the choreography and editing, for which this movie is a masterclass and doesn't really get the recognition it deserves. And both the trailer montages and fight sequences are absolutely perfect for me. I'm just thinking overall, how jarring will it feel, having watched this film so many times, if indeed these montages and fight sequences are re-edited? It may actually end up spoiling the enjoyment of the film for me in some aspect. Rocky's climatic fight with Ivan Drago still stands today as one of the greatest cinematic fight sequences of all time. It's perfect as it is, along with the music as well by Vince DiCola, and there's no reason for it to be changed. So that's probably the biggest concern for me going into any re-edited footage of this movie overall. Will we get a different ending? I suppose the lasting question is whether he will add any songs or take away any songs from the movie. Now, for me personally, the soundtrack for Rocky IV is one of the greatest ever movie soundtracks within all of the 1980s. We have all of those great tracks from Living in America, No Easy Way Out, Hearts on Fire, so euphoric, so addictive, so contagious in many ways, and integral to how special the film is overall. I would really hate it if Stallone tinkered with these songs in any way just to change the overall mood of the film. But despite all of this, I still think there'll be enough respect and dedication to the edition overall. I still think the characters will still seem as they are. So despite all of my concerns, I still think there'll be enough respect to the characters. Rocky franchise, of course, is hugely integral to Sylvester Stallone, his status and also his legacy. So I think he respects the material. He still understands what the characters mean, what they stand for, not only in particular in terms of the story, but also in terms of a cultural reference as well. So I'm pretty much sure that whatever goes on within this edited edition, that all of the classic characters, Rocky, Adrian, Apollo, Paulie, Ivan Drago, will all still seem the same as what they are from the original version. But it will be, at the very least, interesting to see how much different of a film that we get through Rocky IV. And overall, I probably feel it will be better in terms of a story, better in terms of character development. But as long as Sylvester Stallone doesn't tinker too much in terms of the montages and the fight sequences overall, then we could be onto something quite special here, and it could end up being resulting in actually better than the theatrical version in terms of a film perspective. But In terms of my overall feelings, I think Rocky 4 is perfect as it is, but we'll wait and see what changes Stallone makes and whether it will result. Do you think it will supersede the original cut, or do you feel that the original version should be left alone and that we don't really need a director's cut like this to exist? Let me know what you think in the comments. Please also hit those like and subscription and notification buttons so I can provide you with more high content like this in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves, stay at safe distances, and I will see you very, very soon.